Hey everybody, this is Dream, and today we're going to be taking a look at our 7-game Major League Baseball slate. Before I get started, can you guys smash that like and subscribe button? We have no issues today with weather, so that's good. Hang on one second. I want to check this out real quick. All right. Um, we have no issue with weather today, so I think it's going to be a pretty solid slate from that perspective. But we do have some decent scoring games, and we also have some low scoring games on this one, with the Minnesota Chicago White Sox game having a total of 6.5 runs only, which is extremely low. But overall, I do think this slate is pretty good, and we actually avoid a lot of the teams that we don't always, that are always kind of irritating to use or not use because they're good but not great type teams. So we have a pretty good slate here. I really like this slate a lot. I think the pitching is balanced. We have some couple of GPP plays, a couple of top tier options, and then we have some avoidable options as well. And then each position looked pretty good today. So let's go ahead and get into it. So we'll start with our pitchers. Now our top two guys are Ryan here for Minnesota. Now this game is going to feature a very low total. He's also got the best K rate on the slate. Obviously, we do want K rate here. And he is going to be the top option by far, as the White Sox are the worst batting average in baseball, and they're last in home runs, and they're also facing a strong strikeout pitcher. He's going to be very chalky today, though he is the most expensive by a lot, but he's definitely worth it based on that, at least at this point. I think he's a solid option here. He's been, he hadn't had the best start to the season. He had one big game against Detroit, and he had a bad game against Detroit. He hasn't limited the earned runs a ton, but he is getting enough strikeouts that it doesn't matter too much. As long as he doesn't give up too many earned runs, he'll be okay. But I think this game is going to be low scoring. So looking at Lopez for Atlanta, he's also a very interesting play. He has started the season phenomenally. He in his first 3 games, he's been over 25 points in 2 of them, and he also 17 fantasy points against the White Sox first time in. I think he's in a really solid spot here against Miami, who's just not a very good team either. An 18 to 30 fantasy point game is his range here. The K rate isn't as high as I'd like it to be, but it's plenty good enough for this matchup. So I think it's definitely he's definitely viable here. And then I have three GPP plays. It's Schmidt, Crochet, and Gray. I think you could kind of swap around these three and have some opportunity with any of them. They're all similarly priced here. But Crochet has the most strikeout potential, and then Schmidt, and then Gray. And that's kind of how I would play that. But Seattle is sneaky good from a stacking perspective, so I don't think you have to go with Gray. But so I would probably look at Crochet and Schmidt as the best two options here, just simply because they have the better strikeout stuff and the lower totals. But those three of my GPP plays, and then I have one extreme GPP and Rodriguez for Toronto against Kansas City, mostly because he is way overpriced, just to be clear here. So there's just no way to really be super happy about him. But he's only going to pitch 3 to 4 innings, but he's managed 6 and 7 strikeouts in his first 2 games this season, and he is facing a team that can strike out sometimes. So I think he's a interesting kind of a Hail Mary play if you think he can get over 15 to 20 fantasy points. But just keep in mind he won't likely be able to get a win. He won't be able to get more than 3 or 4 innings. So he's definitely extremely risky. And if you want a super Hail Mary, then that would be John Boyle, or say Joe Boyle, as he actually does have the stuff to have a decent game here because he can get some strikeouts. But he is facing the Yankees, and they look very chalky and uh, attractive from a batting perspective, so he's definitely avoidable. But if you wanted anybody at the bottom half of this slate, he'd be the guy simply because his strikeout rate is higher than anybody else, sub $8,300. So with that said, let's get into the bats here. So the bats, they do look somewhat interesting today. The catchers. I do like 4 guys here. The top being Campasuno for San Diego. I think he's going to be popular today. He's a great play. He's priced fairly, and he looks really solid. He didn't. He has been pretty good so far in the Colorado series as well. He hadn't hit a home run, but 12 and 9 fantasy points, and we can definitely take a similar type of game in this particular game as well. So he's definitely solid. Of course, if you want more home run potential, then that would be Cal Raleigh. He's been absolutely phenomenal to start this year. He was my favorite yesterday, and he definitely paid off with his home run with 19 fantasy points. I missed on the pitchers yesterday, but I got the bats right. So Seattle was great yesterday from that fantasy perspective on that front, and he was the dominant play. That's why I'm a little concerned about the uh, Gray at Texas being a pitcher because they've got some guys that can hit home runs here for a catcher, and he looks really good today on the metrics. But some value plays at this position that also look good, and I was waiting for him to show up as a great option. Let's see, this season, and one is Jansen for Toronto. Now he's only played a handful of games so far, and he's had one decent game. He hadn't hit a home run yet, but he is a guy that when he does get in certain situations, he's somebody I like to pop in there as a cheap play, and he's nice and he's $3,400, so he's definitely somebody that's interesting today. He definitely draws some good metrics for this one, and then Diaz for let's see, Diaz for uh, Colorado also looks decent today, though he's a little bit pricey. Obviously, he's going to be better at home than on the road, as he's going to have more upside there. But he is pricey today, but I do think Colorado is stackable, so he's definitely one of the ways you can do that. So moving on to first base, our top overall option here is Matt Olson. Now he has struggled lately, but he definitely has great metrics for this game, and I think Atlanta might blow up in this one. And if they do, then he'll definitely be one of the reasons why. He's one of my favorite plays from their team today. But some other options here are Vlad Jr., who's been pretty good the last few games, with the exception of yesterday against Kansas City. He had 0 points, but he does have some upside here. He does have home run potential, and I do think he's a great option on the slate. Cronenworth is also somebody I like a lot today, and he was the guy I was going to say that he has had several good games lately. He's priced up a little bit more than he has been, but this series against Colorado gives him a lot of upside, and he has multi-hit potential like he did yesterday. So I look for him to be another solid play. And if you go with the San Diego Padres stack, then he would definitely be my first baseman on that. And then I've also been waiting for him to pop into my metric happiness slate here with Nate Lowe. He has been a guy in the past that I really liked in situations, and he is in that kind of situation today. So he's a great value play at $3,800. If you go with the Texas stack, you can also put him in there. But if you don't, then you can just lock him in. He's actually started the season okay. Now he hadn't hitting a home run or anything, but he's got 4, 8, and 8 fantasy points to start. So I think he's gonna be somebody that has some home run potential today. He's definitely worth a look. Second base, this is a struggle position here. There's not a ton to like here. Bogarts for San Diego is my favorite play, as he is in the best situation, and he has some home run potential on this one. But he's expensive and somewhat hard to roster. I do like Jorge Polanco again. He didn't really pay off yesterday because he only got 4 fantasy points, but he does look good again today, and he does draw good metrics here. He's just struggled to start the year. This is one position where I think you might want to try to pay down for Davis Schneider for Toronto. He looks like the metrics are very good here. He's been up and down throughout the season. He has a low batting average, but he does draw some good potential in this one, and I think he's going to be somewhat popular at this position. Looking at third base, this position is also kind of wonky. It's actually pretty expensive today, with Ryan McMahon being the top overall guy for Colorado. Now, he's been absolutely phenomenal to start the season. He's actually been better on the road than at home, which is wacky, but he's got more home run potential at home. Uh, and so he definitely draws good metrics here. I think this is a game that will likely be pretty high scoring, and he'll probably have a good opportunity to get some of those fantasy points. I also like Austin Riley a lot, though he's extremely expensive. And similar to Matt Olson, he's really struggled somewhat to start the season, but he does have that home run upside. And I think Atlanta is going to be a popular stack today. And then another guy you could look at is Eguy Rosario for San Diego. Assuming he starts again, then he'll be somebody that's interesting. You just got to make sure he starts, and hopefully he doesn't get pulled out of the game like he did yesterday again. But uh, he does have that happen sometimes, but he definitely draws some potential here as a cheap play at this position, especially at a position that's lacking cheap plays. Another option, though, is Garcia for Kansas City. He's a good contrarian option today, as he has good home run metrics for this game. Looking at shortstop, this shortstop is actually extremely dense today. We got a lot of good options here, but Kim from San Diego is one of my favorite plays. He really does jump off the page today. He was good yesterday. He's been good a couple of times last week when I've liked him a lot, and he falls into that situation again today. Corey Seager, also interesting for Texas. I think that Seager is in a really good spot here, and while he struggled some to start the season, he does draw great metrics here, but he's very expensive today. Bobby Witt Jr. is also somebody you can go with, though he is extremely expensive, but he's extremely expensive because he's been fantastic to start the year. And then I also like Tovair for Colorado, as his metrics are good here. He's also really good at home so far this season. He also has home run potential. He is a little riskier today due to his price being overpriced, but and then two value plays here would be Bo Bichette for Toronto. He has struggled to start the season, but he's had some good games recently. He's had three straight games with hits now, and he's been scoring some fantasy points decently. So I think he's a viable option on the slate, and he's priced okay enough. I also like J.P. Crawford for Seattle if you wanted to go that route. He's definitely somebody. If you go with this Seattle stack against Gray, then he would definitely be somebody I would fit in there. He's been really solid lately. Not a huge home run threat, but he definitely has the good metrics for this game. Look at outfielders. We're going to start at the top here with our top overall plays. So we're going to start with Acuna, Soto, Judge, and Tatis Jr. All four of these guys have a lot of good potential today, and they all jump off the page. So it's going to be hard to roster even one of them with the way prices are today. But I do think that if you can fit one of these guys in today, that's probably worthwhile. I'm probably going to rank them Tatis, Acuna, Soto, and then Judge. Then a top tier value play, which I think is a great option on the slate, is going to be George Springer uh, for Toronto. He's going to be somebody I'm going to put in quite a few lineups. He's been inconsistent to start the year, but he has really good home run metrics today, and he's really jumping off the page. So I think he's in a great spot. I also like Jurkison Profar for Jurickson Profar for San Diego. He looks like he's been really solid again. I also like Evan Turner not Evan Turner, Carter for Texas. He's been playing pretty well, and he has some good upside for this game. Michael Harris for Atlanta is going to be really good at a Atlanta stack. Seth Brown for Oakland would be a one-off guy there if you were going to be interested in trying to do that kind of thing. Sean Bouchard for Colorado, if he was to draw the start, he would be somebody I would look at. Byron Buxton finally hit a home run yesterday, and if he can, and he's been interesting metrics wise for several games, and he's actually been doing pretty good. So I think he's a viable option again today. Varsho for Toronto, also very interesting at a Toronto stack. As a car for San Diego, also interesting. He really was big the other day, but he's still decent today. Rayleigh for Seattle is very interesting today if you go with the Seattle stack. And then Davis Schneider, who can play multiple positions, is also somebody that's of interest for Toronto. I really do like some of these Toronto bets today. So, with that said, if we look at our sub $3,000 plays, the top guys are Jose Ozacar in outfield, Ryan Noda at first base, Kyle Farmer at second or third, Manuel Margot at outfield, Jose Miranda at third base, and Michael Massey at second base. So let's go ahead and look at our stacks now. Let me get this up here. Hang on. All right, so we got our stacks up here. So we do have an interesting stackable slate here. Um, I think Colorado and San Diego are both very popular stacks today, as this game should be high scoring. But I do think that the San Diego stack is better because it's actually fairly cheap as outside of at least Tatis Jr. And they are overpriced for this game versus Colorado, which is somewhat surprising. So you can actually get a lot of them mixed in there, even if you pay up at pitching. Colorado, on the other hand, is actually fairly expensive, and it's going to be hard to roster that team as easy as San Diego is. So I think I'm going to be prioritizing San Diego more. But there's definitely a couple guys like Blackman, Tovar, and McMahon that I will definitely try to utilize from Colorado. Looking at Atlanta, they are a lot more expensive than Toronto, so it'll be harder to roster this stack, but they do have some good options with Acuna, Harris, Riley, Olson, Ozuna, and Kalenic. Looking at Toronto, though, Toronto has such a great stack here as they're nicely priced, and I really do like it a lot with Springer, Vlad Jr., Bichette, Turner, Varsho, Schneider, Jansen, and Biggio. I think there's just a lot of good options and a lot of good ways to swing a Toronto stack today. Looking at the next four stacks, these are not the best stacks, but they're not terrible. The Yankee stack with Soto, Judge, Rizzo, Torres, and Verdugo, it's going to be pretty expensive from Soto and Judge at least, but it's definitely viable. The Seattle stack is very kind of sneaky today with Crawford, Raleigh, Polanco, and Rayleigh. I wouldn't go too much farther beyond that with Seattle, but those guys definitely have some upside today. Looking at the Texas stack of Seager, Carter, Garcia, Simeon, and Lowe, I think that's a really solid way to go, and that's also got a boost to lefties. For Kansas City, Garcia, Witt Jr., Pasquantino, Melendez, Velasquez, and Massey all look decent. This stack is higher price than I expected today. So that Texas and Kansas City stacks, they're gonna be hard to roster. They're expensive, whereas that Seattle stack is cheap, and the Yankees, at least the backup part of their stack is cheap as well. Looking at the sub optimal stacks here, we have some two, three. I'm doing these ones a little bit differently. I'm just trying to find the best like one-off type options, and that's kind of what we got here. So for Houston, Altuve, Alvarez, and Tucker, obviously extremely expensive. Somewhat hard to roster any of them, but they're probably avoidable today. Looking at Minnesota though, this is a very cheap stack, and you could get some cheap one-offs here with Margot, Buxton, Farmer, Miranda, or Santana. For Chicago Cubs, Bellinger and Hop are the only two guys here that really jump off the page, and they're pretty expensive as well. For Miami, Arias and Chisholm Jr. fall in the same category as Chicago's Bellinger and Hop. Expensive for what they have, but not a whole lot else to like. And then for Oakland, this is definitely going to be a potentially sneaky stack today. I don't expect Oakland to do a lot, but sometimes they have random games that are good. And the metrics for these guys was actually not bad today, with Noda, Ruiz, Brown, Toro, Henderson, and G-Lock being the top options. And for the White Sox, if you just want two one-offs, then Jimenez and Vaughn would be the top two one-offs. So with that said, guys, oh, I did want to mention, so today we actually have a different game on DraftKings, which is the MLB Arcade. It uses the same slate. The scoring is quite a bit different here, as you can see, and so that is definitely going to be an interesting thing. But I think that you could utilize similar to this. However, if you're if you decide to play the arcade version, you want to prioritize pitchers that get strikeouts and potential wins, and then batters that hit home runs and get stolen bases. So I just wanted to mention that. But overall, this is gonna be different because you'll have one pitcher and five hitters in this one, and you can only use three hitters from one team. But I definitely want to use Ryan here as the pitcher. I'm not from a hitting perspective, we got to find guys that are cheap here that are going to be able to play, and they're going to fit their prices here. So like obviously teams like the um, San Diego Colorado game are going to have guys that we want to utilize, and if we look at that, then we can definitely find guys like Campesino, and Profar and Rogers, and Diaz that fit in price ranges that are pretty good for this. Even Kim and Cronenworth fit really well. But I was going to look at what Springer's price is over here. Probably gonna make him be one of those guys. Yeah, he's cheap. So the pricing on this is different, but it's similar to like it's equitable to the prices on the normal slate, as just based on like the fantasy production potential, like and against other batters and stuff. So I think overall this is gonna be a very interesting slate too. And so it's definitely something you can utilize. You can also play for 1 penny entries on this one and have an opportunity to win like $10 or $5 on the entry. But so yeah, make sure to check that out as well. I'll try to, if they keep doing that, I'll try to talk about it more and more as we go. But right now, I just want to mention